Over the past 20 years, American travelers have been exposed to more scrutiny around the country's borders, mainly in connection with national security. But a permanent resident and her 14-year-old daughter, who's a U.S. citizen, were subjected to something much more intrusive by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. In the mother's case, repeated strip searches of body cavities, along with separation from her daughter and detention. The incidents happened on return trips from the Dominican Republic in 2019 and last year, and they're cited in a lawsuit filed with representation by lawyers for civil rights. To tell us about their experience is a staff attorney with the group, Arielle Sharma. Thank you very much for being with us, Arielle.
Thank you for having us, Chris.
Arielle, what certainly stands out in this case is the intrusiveness of the search and the frequency. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so Ms. Ortega is a regular traveler. She is not a criminal. She is not a drug mule. She's not bringing weapons into this country. She is simply trying to go back and forth, as many travelers do every single day. She wanted to see her family, and in flying back to Boston Logan Airport, she was subjected to abhorrent and shocking treatment by Customs and Border Protection agents. Not only did it happen on one occasion, not only did it happen on 2 occasions, it happened on 3 occasions. And every single time that they did not find something on her that corroborated their outlandish suspicions was another reason for them not to search her the next time. And yet they continued to subject her to this treatment over and over again with really no reason for it.
Arielle, while the mother was being strip searched and interrogated, what was going on with the daughter and the trips when she was accompanying the mother?
So Ms. Ortega's 14-year-old daughter was separated from her mother for hours on end. She was not given any information. She also was asked questions, but for the majority of the time, she was just sitting all by herself, asking for CBP agents to give her information about where her mother is, what they're doing to her, and when they're going to be allowed to go home. As her daughter told us, that whole time, all she wanted was to see her mom and go home after a long flight.
Did somebody ask her for a passcode to her phone?
Yes, there was at the beginning of one of the searches, they asked her for a passcode to her phone. She, afraid of what would happen if she said no, not understanding that she had the ability to say no, gave them that passcode. They then go through the phone and ask her about personal things that are within her phone. They ask her about her boyfriend, they ask her about her friends, and she answers all these questions not knowing what else to do, but felt very violated and very uncomfortable by adults that she does not know asking her about, what's a sensitive issue for a young girl, her love life.
I know these days we have these smartphones, but how different is that from the classic case of wiretapping without a warrant?
Cell phones typically require, if you have a passcode on your cell phone, police departments are required to have a warrant to look into your cell phone. There was a recent case not so recent anymore, by the Supreme Court that recognized how much information we keep on our cell phones. It's not like we're carrying around just a few numbers. Now you have all your bank account information, you have your personal text messages, photographs. It's like carrying a whole room of your house around in your pocket. And so this is an extremely invasive search of Ms. Ortega's daughter's private life.
I want to ask you about what happened to the mother, because there are cases when people do carry illegal drugs in body cavities, and there's a certain way you're supposed to search them. Was that done here?
According to CBP's internal policies, these internal cavity searches must be done by a medical expert. And this is to protect people from what can be both physically painful and damaging searches. Ms. Ortega agreed to have an X-ray done. She agreed to allow them to do what they needed to do to prove that she was innocent. And instead of going about this the proper way, they chose to intrude upon her bodily integrity in a demeaning and humiliating way, all the while not telling her in her own language what was going on, what was happening to her.
Now, what also seemed to have been happening here is that they found things that were not really criminal in nature, but there's a way that they reacted to what they found, or even some things like love letters, and they say things ridiculing. What about the legality of that?
Every piece of Miss Ortega's experience was to humiliate her. Says it very plainly when she says, the hardest thing about this experience was for her was that she was visibly crying, visibly upset, begging for some sort of understanding. And these officers continued not to see her as a full human being. They did not have reasonable suspicion to search her. They did not have cause to search her. Perfectly innocent experiences, such as traveling from the Dominican Republic or having her period on a flight, were twisted into something nefarious and dangerous. And there was no reason for it. There's nothing in Miss Ortega's history and nothing that CBP has ever found on her to have even begun to qualify this type of dehumanizing, humiliating, and painful treatment.
Well, I know one of the things you did, you were able to corroborate from the agency that the searches took place and who was involved and who gave the orders. But what about the line between when they're allowed to do a random search and when they're allowed to escalate that and do something more intrusive? What did they need, especially for a strip search? What do you need to be able to do that?
In order for CBP to be able to strip search someone, they need to show and be able to explain and point to something that shows that they are bringing contraband into this country, and that where they're going to search, i.e. inside of somebody, would show that that's where that contraband is. Having a random search where maybe they look in your luggage, maybe they pat you down, is extremely different than pulling someone into a small room, ordering her to take her clothes off and expose her body to people and humiliate her and degrade her in this way. They fail to treat our client like a human being, let alone that they fail to follow the law.
One of the things that struck me here is that the plaintiff, she is a legal resident of the United States, but she holds a green card. I imagine people in that position, they probably know pretty well at that point that they don't want to antagonize the US government. So here she is filing the suit. What does that say?
Ms. Ortega put up with this once, and she put up with invasive searches that didn't include body cavity searches, but it got to the point when they searched her twice within hours of each other and refused to let her go, that she recognized that there was nothing she could do except make it stop. She could no longer face facing them alone. She needed some help, and that's when she reached out. It's incredibly courageous, and she is worried about the potential ramifications on herself and on her family. In fact, family members and friends have separated themselves from her and refused to fly with her, refused to travel with her, because they too are afraid of what CBP might do to them if they're simply associated with Miss Ortega. But when you're at the end of the line, you're at the end of the line. And that's where Miss Ortega was. She had to choose between being able to go to the Dominican Republic to see her family or risk the antagonizing CBP. And frankly, it came to a point where it felt to her like it couldn't get that much worse than what they've already done to her.
By the way, in the complaint, there's something that says that this is part of a pattern. What about it? Is there something that's been documented already in the aggregate, at least?
So when we look for similar cases across the country, we see that there have been an increasing number of women of color in particular who are suing CBP for similar practices, for racial profiling, whether it gets to the level that it did with Ms. Ortega or not. There seems to be some sort of pattern where women of color are being improperly targeted, and also improperly targeted for strip searches and body cavity searches.
Which seems to me saying that maybe one of the reasons for talking about this legal action is that there might be other people out there that you might want to hear from.
Absolutely. Yes, it would be very shocking to me if this has only happened to Ms. Ortega. We understand how scary it can be to come forward and to be the one to put your name out there, but the fact of the matter is that it won't stop until people come forward. And that's what we're here to do, is to help people get justice and to make sure that CBP follows the law. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is about. It's not about whether or not they're keeping our country safe. It's whether or not they're abiding by the constitutional requirements to do that. And the individuals who pass through their hands have to be safe as well.
One of the other things that puzzled me about this case is that they came back on a plane from the Dominican Republic. there were other people on that plane. Any idea about how many of them might have been searched the same way, or is there something that's unusual here?
We're not aware at this time of who else from that plane may have been stopped. However, because this has happened over multiple plane trips, it seems to be something that was targeted at Miss Ortega, and who else, and not necessarily at the plane as a whole.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Chris.
That was Arielle Sharma from Lawyers for Civil Rights.